Hey, so here we are with this nice 3-axis camera gimbal, the computer, and the cable to connect the two things together. And we're going to be talking about the firmware that's running on this thing. So like the program that's controlling its functions, which at this point is just camera stabilization. It doesn't do much else. So the firmware, that's a new project called OpenBGC. It's on GitHub, and it doesn't have at this point much in the way of documentation, so this video is gonna also be the reference for installing and using this firmware. So I'm just gonna walk through the setup, the setting up of the gimbal, because if you've used gimbals, you know they need calibration. There's multiple steps. They're not just power on and it works, unless it's someone did this at the factory. So but generally, if either you're changing the firmware, you're changing the parameters, you change the camera, you are building your own gimbal, perhaps you need to do all of this yourself. So I'm gonna split the video into two parts. The first one's gonna be what the project's about and how to flash it, how to install it on the device, right? How to put it, download it from the internet, and put the firmware on a little chip on a PCB that's right here. And the second part is going to be the calibration, so the configuration. Okay, so let's start. If you're building a gimbal or you want to use something that has a API that you can, so that you can control the gimbal from a computer, or you can anything more advanced in terms of like configuration, scripting, whatever you want to do, and a project you need, you probably end up looking at either SimpleBGC 32 or Storm 32. They both have been around for at least 10, 15, perhaps 20 years. So SimpleBGC, in fact, is an evolution of an earlier project. But when I did look at, I wanted an open source firmware to run all those things. Both of these projects, they have some degree of openness in that some hardware designs are free, others are not. So they're on GitHub. But if you look for the source code, it's not there, and there aren't many alternatives either. So there are basically those two projects. They both ship binary blobs for the firmware, which is good for a lot of users, but sometimes you either want open source code because you want it to be open source, or you specifically need to add some features, like in my case. And I looked, probably about 15 years ago, there was nothing, and I looked again last year, and again there was still nothing. So I set to writing an open alternative to SimpleBGC 32, and that's it. And the working name right now is OpenBGC. Not very creative, but here it is. So that's the background. I'm gonna walk through first flashing the firmware onto the thing. So there are three ways to connect this thing to a computer. One is Bluetooth. I wouldn't recommend Bluetooth for flashing the firmware. Maybe it's good for sending individual commands like control, but not as reliable as cable. So the second way is unscrewing this from this. Okay, and then you get full access to the USB port here, because this ring sort of prevents you from connecting a cable the usual way. And the third way is you use an X-Acto knife to cut a little notch there, so it plugs into here just fine. If you do this, maybe it's a safety feature. I tried it, never had any issues with both the gimbal powered on by battery and the cable. You only need to modify one micro USB cable, and you're done. So next thing, you need to download the firmware. Here we are in a good company. Here's how you do this. Okay, screen recording on. You're gonna go to GitHub to download the firmware binary. You can build it from the repository. The code's here, but it's easier to just go into the releases section here. There's just one release at this time. You download the whole package, and I'm gonna basically unpack this thing. Enter the directory. Okay, so we've got the tarball unpacked. Here are the contents. This is the specifically a firmware that we're gonna want to flash onto the device. And how do we do that? So it takes two steps. First, when you power it on, I'm plugging in the USB cable here. Okay, the starter powers on the electronics, the chip in the gimbal, its main controller, and everything except the motors are depowered. So it goes directly to running the firmware. Where firmware is on there right now, it doesn't matter. It starts the firmware, and we need to tell it to shut down that firmware and go into bootloader mode. That's going to allow us to program a different firmware. From here, I wanted to recommend show a GUI way first, a graphical way, but it's just easier to do it from the command line. If you got this, if you're here already, it's really easy. You run this command, make bl in the release directory where you extracted the package contents, and it sends a command. Here it is, directly to gimbal, and poof, now it's in bootloader mode. And you just type make upload, and it starts flashing the firmware. It takes maybe 10 to 15 seconds. Whatever firmware is in this directory, it puts it on the gimbal, and it's gonna directly start running it. So we will directly see the output from the new firmware. And here it is. It's ready. That's it. Now let me also show you the GUI way. So there are various ways to do this. You can, let's see, you can use the original SimpleBGC GUI. It's not exactly straightforward, so let me just show it to you for documentation. So we're in the firmware upgrade tab. Actually, we're gonna need to go to debug. Okay, from here you basically have to do the same two steps before. Switch to bootloader mode, which is kinda convoluted. How you do it here? You can do it by telling it to connect to serial port. Okay, we connected, and we're gonna send the command 51. Well, it's actually hexadecimal for 81. And where you're running OpenBGC and SimpleBGC, it's the same command. This is compatible. Send it, and there you go. We're in bootloader mode now. We're gonna disconnect. We're gonna go to firmware upgrade, switch to manual, and we're gonna select our OpenBGC binary now. Let's see. There it is. It does the flashing just as well as the command line way. It's a little hacky because you need to remember the command number. Normally, when you upgrade SimpleBGC, it's the same thing. It does the same thing, but it will does the behind the scenes, so you don't see it, right? Okay, so here we have it already running OpenBGC, and now your gimbal is officially useless because it's not calibrated and it's not set up to do anything yet. So see you in the next video, the second video, where I'm gonna show you how to configure it, make it work, make it do something. Oh, and by the way, if you ever need to switch back from OpenBGC to SimpleBGC, you're just gonna follow the same steps in reverse order. No, just kidding. You're just gonna be do the same thing basically, but you go to firmware upgrade manual again, and now you first switch to the bootloader mode, same as in the other case, and now you will select just the the SimpleBGC binary instead of the OpenBGC one. And that's it. You do this, you hit flash, and you're back, and your settings will have probably been preserved. Obviously, you should make a backup, but your settings normally will be there. You don't need to like restore them or anything. You just flash this, and you'll be back running the original firmware as if nothing had happened.